Uprising of a small startup called Tokyo Telecommunication Engineering Corporation to a mega success story Sony is a remarkable case study. Just right after the Second World War, Ibuka and Mr. Morita, they started the journey with Tokyo Telecommunication Engineering Corporation. Both of them had a very sound academic background. They are graduates of science, and they worked in Japanese Navy during the Second World War. They were looking for opportunities to build a technology company. And being science graduate and having experience working with the Japanese Navy, particularly in the area of radio communication, they were very much aware about the invention of transistor in Bell Laboratory. In 1952, Mr. Ibuka made a trip to the US and started to get to know about what was happening with regard to transistor. And he came to know that Bell Laboratory was about to license transistor, but it would cost almost $25,000 at the time. And they managed to get the support of the Japanese government, the MITI, and eventually they took the license. Then they started working on a product called pocket radio. At the time, already some companies like Texas Instrument, Emerson, Raytheon are working on that. But they felt developing a transistor radio could be a humble beginning of getting into consumer electronics, as they didn't have any option to work with the military. So in 1955, they came up with a prototype, and eventually in 1957, they released their first transistor radio. And important lesson is that Sony not only made the radio out of the transistor, they kept improving the transistor itself. And they keep improving the process of making the transistor. So initially, transistor radio was a very primitive with respect to the vacuum tube radio. Vacuum tube radios were producing far cleaner, louder sound. On the other hand, transistor radio was producing quite noisy, tiny sound. But American college graduates welcomed it, and they started using it because they wanted to enjoy rock and roll musics with their friends in the neighborhood, for which vacuum tube large radios are not a suitable option. So in order to have something which works, though in a poorer way, but it was better than having nothing. So this is a non-consumption segment of the radio market at that time. And as Sony was focusing on not only making the radio based on the available transistors, Sony kept working on the improving the transistor and the process of making it. As a result, Sony started becoming successful in producing better quality radio at lower cost. By the way, just over a couple of years of the release of the radio, Sony's expansion was remarkable. It grew from a 7 people company in 1952 to almost 500 people by 1957, 1958. Then what happened that Sony's success of improving the underlying technology core, that is a transistor, and making the transistor radio better and cheaper, eventually led to making it a stronger substitute or a strong substitute to the vacuum tube radio. So it was started entering into the market segment occupied by the vacuum tube radio. At that time, RCA, Zenith, and many others were very dominant players in making vacuum tube radios. They overlooked the emergence of the transistor because initially transistor was a very tiny device producing a little power and often noisy. So it was not a strong substitute at all to the vacuum tube technology in supporting making high quality radio receivers. On the other hand, Sony's gradual success led to a situation when the transistor radio became a stronger substitute to the vacuum tube. In one hand, it became a better option because it was compact, it was consuming less energy, and it was as good as vacuum tube radio in terms of quality of sound and eventually the energy level. On the other hand, it was quite less costly to produce because it requires far less materials and labors and other components. That means eventually transistor radio grew as a better and less costly alternative to the vacuum tube radio, which caused disruption to the vacuum tube radio, which caused disruption to the firms who are producing vacuum tube radios. With the growth of the transistor radio based on a new technology core. And that the genesis, and that is the genesis of uprising of the Sony. So Sony uprised not by imitating, not by copying, not just by making. Sony created a success out of the disruptive innovation. It took a license of a new technology core and it kept improving it. And that journey was so deep in terms of pursuing the basic technology that eventually one of the members of Sony's R&D team in 1974 got Nobel Prize for unique contributions made in the transistor technology. So this is a typical example which could be analyzed and could be followed by many who would like to create success of ideas without having a strong root in basic research. They can take new generation technology, they can take license of them, and they can focus on improving them. They can focus on those products which could grow out of this new technology and eventually become a success story. So this is an example where, without having a strong relevance to the defense technology, remarkable success stories could show up. And Sony eventually institutionalized this mechanism and repeated in some other areas and made similar remarkable successes, particularly in solid-state image sensor-based video camera. So this uprising of Sony not only not only gives an example that how a startup could be a large corporation, it also offers us a model of building idea economy in developing countries.